Welcome back to the Hardware Unbox podcast for episode 59. Steve and I are going to do a bit of a deep dive, not necessarily too deep of a dive. We're going to do a lot of speculation, to be fair, about
a surface level dive.
There will be a surface level dive on GPU pricing. What's going on with its supply availability? What's going on with prices? Why can't you buy a 5090 for the price that it is currently listed for? So yeah, a lot of discussion on that. We provide a few theories, not sure how accurate they're going to be, but we're going to talk about that for most of this episode. So yeah, let's come along for the ride. We're back, Steve, for another week to talk about GPU shenanigans, because it seems like there's an ongoing saga of GPU shenanigans with the GeForce 50 series. So we'll be talking a bit about that. But how's your week been so far? Been enjoying some more testing?
Well, first, let me just say I love me some GPU shenanigans. It's just nothing better. But yeah, for something different, I thought I would take a step back, change up what I'm doing with my life, and just rethink things. So I've been doing that by benchmarking Kingdom Come Deliverance with 35 GPUs at 3 resolutions and 4 quality settings.
Nice, that'll be good.
And it feels good. I feel like I'm making progress. So yeah, I'm really happy with how things are going. And I've also been testing a few AIB graphics cards on the side while I've been doing that. Nice. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, that's been good. Yeah, I've been testing some DLSS 4 stuff out this way as well. So getting into the upscaling side of things right now. So lots of different configurations and thinking about how to approach that testing a bit differently to how I've done in the past to sort of more benchmark it, I guess. So yeah, I've been looking into like what sort of areas we need to look at, especially because like FSR4 is coming up. So wanted to make sure that everything's locked and loaded for all that and ready to do the most in-depth comparisons we can. So it's been a lot of testing on that side of things. But yeah, in between all of that, no one can actually buy the GPUs that we've been testing in our videos. No one can get a 5090, no one can get a 5080, at least for any sort of reasonable price. And that kind of sucks, doesn't it?
Yes, I guess it does suck. I think it sucks. Well, from my perspective, it sucks less than something like the Intel Arc B580, because I feel like people have been holding out for a reasonable quality or a decent $250 US graphics card. Got a bit more screwed there. The guys who were just looking to blow tons of money to try and get the best or the newest thing, it's whatever. Like, let's be honest, 5080, not a terribly great product. Having said that, it's not a bad product, I guess. It's just, while it is arguably the best thing you can get for $1,000 US, so there's that, it's not radically different from the thing we could have got 6 to 12 months prior. And
yeah, it's not a downgrade, right? Like,
no, it's definitely an upgrade of sorts if you were going to buy a 4080 Super. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that you would have been better off if you are looking at buying and you can buy a 5080 for $1,000 US today, you were better off just buying a 4080 Super the moment they hit $1,000 US, which they did do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's about, the opportunity cost of owning the 4080 for potentially 6 to 9 months if you bought it at the MSRP compared to a card that's like 10% faster for the same money now. I think a lot of people would probably, or at least I definitely would take the slightly lower performance to have it for an additional 9 months, which is why the card's obviously disappointing. I think if you're coming into, like, let's say you've suddenly been able to now buy a $1,000 GPU, buying a 5080 isn't awful because it is better than the previous version slightly. So if it's only now that you can afford that, then theoretically, if you could get one for $1,000, it's like, well, it's slightly better than the previous gen version, so fair enough. But yeah, that sort of comparison of if you've been in the market for the past year and you've sort of been like, you were, 4080 Super is kind of, it is what it is. It's a fine product, but I'll just wait for the next generation. Then the next generation arrives. Then, yeah, you've effectively been burnt because you could have had the same thing 9 months ago and been enjoying it in all the games that have come out in the last little while. And that's not even including the fact that $1,000 seems like it's just a lie. Like, it's just not available for that price, which makes it obviously much worse in terms of the actual price that you're able to buy one for.
In reality, at this point in time, we've actually managed to go backwards somehow. Yeah, sorry about the quick edit there, guys. My headset went flat, and for some reason I can't get it to charge. So I've changed headsets. So
Continuity errors left, right, and center for the video feed.
we got it out of the way early, Tim. And for the people who are listening, they're none the wiser.
Yes, that's right.
So that's good, I guess. Anyway, yeah, I was saying how somehow with the 5080, at least as it currently stands, we've managed to go backwards. Things have gotten worse. Because how many, like you go back, a couple of months ago or just before they started shutting down supply, you could buy a 4080 Super at the MSRP, right? That was
easily.
That was the situation. So things as they currently stand have gotten much worse for about a 10%, let's say 10 to 15% performance uplift on average, but you can't buy it. So yeah, as things stand, situation much worse. And then you have the 5090, which I guess for some people is an exciting product because it is anywhere from 20 to 40, maybe up to 50% faster. I think on average it's around 27, 30%, let's say, faster. So that's a decent performance upgrade over an RTX 4090, but it is at MSRP 30%, 25% more expensive. But as I think we're slowly working our way towards, the MSRP there is also very meaningless because it's meant to be $2,000 US, but good luck buying one for that price. And I think the strategy seems to be that you won't be able to buy one at that price if executed, I guess, successfully from Nvidia's point of view. That's pure speculation on my behalf, but I think what used to be fairly normal for product launches where availability was poor is becoming more of the norm. It seems like they're trying to prolong that period. But whereas we used to, like if you go back, let's go to like the Pascal, so GeForce 10 series. I remember the mainstream GPUs that people used to really want. So your 1060 type cards, and from AMD, it was sort of the RX 480. Those products for weeks after release, you just couldn't buy them. As soon as they came in stock, they got snapped up because they were mainstream affordable GPUs. Everyone wanted one. But the difference there was the price, the MSRP.
Yep.
So you
100%.
And what was an OC model, like $10 more?
I think for like an ultra premium version of a 1060 or whatever, it was probably $30 more, maybe $40. So from $250 US to, you'd be approaching 300, and that would be for like the most absurd expensive model. But most of them were, as you say, like $10 or $20 more.
Yeah, that's pretty much my recollection of that period of time. These days, because we can sit here and we can say, and this is normally what I would say, and it's the same sort of thing I said with the B580, and I think we gave the B580 about 6 weeks before we ultimately made a conclusion on that one. Normally right now I'd be saying, guys, just chill out, okay? Don't get scalped, don't panic buy or try to panic buy, just chill, wait a couple of weeks, wait up to a month, and the cards will be available at MSRP and you'll be able to go and buy one. This is just we've seen this for decades. Popular GPUs get released, you can't buy them upon release. It can't be done. But I'm not sure that's the situation here because of a few other factors, which I guess we can explore and get into. But it seems the other thing I don't remember there being that much of back in the day, and I'm talking not that long ago, like scalpers, whether it be at the retail level, well, I don't even believe retailers are scalping us, and we can talk about that as well. I think retailers they're the ones getting scalped, in my opinion, at least based on the evidence I've seen. And if you wonder what I mean by that, so I've seen some from distributors, for example. Distributors are holding it's kind of like in Australia, at least, like a mafia. So they're saying it is though. It's the distribution mafia of PC parts in Australia.
Yeah.
We have 4090s. You want a 4090? Well, guess what? We bought way too many Core Ultra processors and Z890 motherboards. You guys aren't buying them from us. We want to get rid of them. We need to clear out our inventory to make space. And I've been told that this is an actual deal that has been pitched to retailers, that for them to purchase one RTX 5090 graphics card, so a solitary single 5090, they are required to also purchase 5 Core Ultra processors and 5 Z890 motherboards. So for every one 50
here's your ball and chain that you have to attach to your ankle to buy a 5090.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a real thing. Like that is absolutely a real thing. So that's why retailers, even the bigger ones in Australia, are going to be struggling to fulfill your orders, because the 5090s are being held hostage. And the bargaining chip to release them is you also must take Z890 motherboards and Core Ultra processors. But that's the situation there. But yeah, I don't recall at least those sort of deals, but also more the scalper angle with those earlier GPU releases. So an RX 480, GTX 1080, 1080 Ti. Admittedly, supply was better there. So I think the scalping thing really only comes into play when you have prolonged periods of poor availability, like what we've seen over the cryptocurrency booms and then a bit with the AI boom. So our Nvidia bringing... So let's just say, okay, we're going... I've got a lot of this podcast, and the whole point of the podcast is it's not like the Hardware Unbox channel or Monitors Unboxed, we're presenting facts, and we're giving our opinion that is supported by those facts in the reviews. This is just Tim and I having a chat. So, but I will try to make it clear that when we're talking about what we think Nvidia is doing, that's all speculation. We don't have evidence of it. This isn't an exposing Nvidia's whatever they're doing here. It's just right now the facts are availability is terrible. Why is it terrible? Why is the public being drip fed these cards? And why is it that the public appears to be getting scalped by Nvidia and its partners? Certainly the partners are doing it. We have evidence of that, which we'll talk about. But yeah, as to what the plan is here and what's really going on, we can only speculate. But it seems to me like some lessons, some learnings have been made with stuff like the cryptocurrency boom. So what happened there? Basically, demand for GPUs went through the roof. Everything they could produce was being sold, and people were willing to pay way more than what you could possibly imagine people would pay for a GPU. It was like they were keen as. It was like kind of it was just a weird situation. So anyway, it seems to me like they want to, and they were getting big margins in return. So it seems to me they want those big margins again. And the trick is, how do you create that environment when, there's no extreme demand? So they're sort of artificially, in my opinion, trying to drum up this extreme demand by creating this halo insanely fast flagship product like the 5090 that has no competition. It's the fastest GPU, so people are naturally going to want it. And I'm not talking about people that are buying $200 graphics cards, but there's plenty of people evidently that are willing to spend $2,000 plus on a graphics card.
Yeah.
But there's probably only so many of those people. So how do you convince other people that, are willing to spend over $1,000, but not necessarily $2,000, that they need to spend $2,000 or more? And I think it's the scarcity thing. So that by creating this situation where people are really keen, interested, and desperate to get a 5090 but can't get a 5090, that it makes them, you know what I mean? Like when you become desperate, you're sort of willing
FOMO,
to do it.
Right?
Yeah. And then the people that were willing to spend $2,000, they're like, yeah, I'll buy one for $2,000. It's the fastest thing. It's awesome. I want one. And they're like, well, it's $2,500 actually. Like, okay, whatever. They're hard to get. I just want it. I'll pay the $2,500. Just give me my graphics card.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that seems to be the strategy they're employing here. They're trying to create this. They're trying to. Well, they're definitely. No, I shouldn't say definitely. It appears they're artificially limiting supply. They're drip feeding these cards out to keep people keen. That's my opinion. I don't know what you think about what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been looking back at some AIB pricing from the 10 series just to get an idea of like what was a reasonable amount above back then. And
Mm.
so, for example, I found, the GTX 1060 Gaming X from MSI, which I think was their fairly premium model that was being sold for $290 US, so a $40 premium over the MSRP, which is about 15%. They had a GTX 1080 Gaming X as well. That was $720 US. The MSRP was $600. There was a Founders Edition model for $700. And so you're looking at about $120 premium compared to the very, very base model versions. So today, what they're selling for, just having a look across Newegg for like a 5080, for example, obviously the MSRP is $1,000 and there's a couple of models available at that. But you're looking at most models being $1,200, $1,250, $1,300. And then the ultra premium models like, the Aorus version, I think, is selling for $1,400. These are all out of stock. So just to be clear, they're all out of stock. But this is the price that they were listed for. That ROG Astral was listed at $1,650 on Newegg for the 5080. So they've gone from selling cards for a little over $100 more than the MSRP, which equates to, let's have a look, $120 compared to $600. So it's about a 20% premium back in the Pascal era for a high-end premium version of the GTX 1080 to now that being more the minimum for an OC model. So
inflation doesn't change too much there if you go for the percentages, does it?
no, we're all talking about just relative pricing, how much more are they charging compared to the base model. And I think that they did learn a lot of lessons. I think it's a combination of factors. It's learning the lessons from what can happen when you can't buy GPUs during crypto mining era, but also AIBs and things being unsatisfied with the margins that have been delivered for these GPUs, because they're basically figuring out, right, that what sort of margin would you expect from $1,000 card? Like single-digit sort of margins compared to what Nvidia would be charging them for the overall GPU package. So they're probably making, I don't know, at a guess, like between 5 and 10% on like a base model, like a WindForce Ventus sort of card. But then they're going, well, that kind of sucks. 5, 10%, that's peasant level money. We could be charging $1,200, $1,300 for these cards, and going from making a 5% margin to starting to make a 20%, 30% margin. And so part of that is there's a clear incentive for AIBs to do that. Like that's what they want to have happen. Obviously, if the market is flooded with GPUs, that becomes a lot harder to do because then people will just buy the entry-level models because there's plenty of supply. It doesn't make a lot of sense to buy a $1,300 GPU that's meant to be $1,000, so people would just buy the $1,000 model. Whereas if there's limited supply, the only way that this can really work, where they're forcing people into these 20, 30% margin cards, is if somehow, some miracle, you can't buy enough of them. So then the only options that they can offer are these expensive cards. That's exactly what happened during the crypto mining boom. Whenever there were these restocks of GPUs that were available, they were always the super premium ones. And even if they were the premium models, or even if they weren't the premium models, they just inflated the price of the base model cards, which seems to be happening a bit here with this generation as well. We're seeing reports of the entry-level cards from MSI and ASUS increasing from $1,000 for a 5080 up to more like $1,100, $1,150 or even $1,200. So the mystery that I see beyond this is there's obviously an incentive for AIBs. Distributors will benefit from this as well because they can do what you're saying, the whole bundling thing. Let's get rid of some trash to try and sell, these in-demand cards. The mystery to me is who is limiting the supply, because I don't think the demand is especially high. What we're hearing from retailers and all the evidence we've seen so far is that there's just not very many of these cards. It's not like there's hundreds of thousands of people, screaming to buy these GPUs and lining up at stores to buy them. It's more that retailers are getting like 5 5090s.
Yeah, you can keep that um, sort of illusion of high demand by doing that. So people will say, but they sold out instantly, and
Yeah.
retailers. So some retailers got a surprising amount of 5080s, for example, and we thought that product just wouldn't sell, but it did sell like hotcakes. But again, we're not talking about huge volumes here. Like, it was probably more than we thought, but it's hard to gauge that initial, reaction from like the FOMO, like people just
Hmm.
getting excited about it being a new GeForce series and having to own it so they can say they have a GeForce 50 series GPU. So they've got to carefully manage maintaining, that I don't know, like the want and need for this product that people don't necessarily need. Having said that, again, like, it gets confusing because it sounds like we're dunking on the 5080 and saying it's a crap product and you shouldn't buy it. But it's just, I guess we've covered that. But I always come back to it whenever we say, like, you shouldn't be buying a 5080 or like they're not good, and we thought sales wouldn't be good, if you know what I mean. Despite the fact that if you're spending $1,000, it's probably the product to get, but then
Hmm.
you can't get it for $1,000. I think, though, people listening to these conversations, there's a few like details we leave out, I don't discuss, because both you and I understand them. So when we're talking about who's jacking up the prices, who's to blame for that, and we'll get varying opinions right across the board of people defending Nvidia, going, well, it's not Nvidia's fault. They can't control the partners. It's the partners that are scalping you, or it's the distributors. And, we've seen those sort of comments time and time again. But the thing to be aware of before you have that opinion is that Nvidia controls literally everything. So if you have to play by Nvidia's rules. So if you're doing something, and Nvidia sees you doing it and they allow it, then fine, but they're allowing it. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
things don't happen in the industry and Nvidia observes them and goes, well, we don't really like that they're selling them for that much, but gosh darn it, there's nothing we can do about it. It sucks, guys. We want you to be able to get 5080s for $1,000, but it's just, what, it's out of our hands. What can we do? No, that's not at all how this industry works. Nvidia controls the supply entirely. You cannot get Nvidia GPUs without going to Nvidia. They carefully manage allocation, supply, the whole lot, regardless. Like, they've always done that. So that's why you don't see RTX 3080s with 20 gigabytes of VRAM. So those cards did technically exist and they were going to be rolled out, and Nvidia just decided, no, we're not going to do that now. We don't want 20 gigabyte 3080s. So that got canned. But it's very possible for their partners to make different memory configurations or different overclocking profiles or different cards, but it's not allowed. You do that and you're kicked out of what I believe now, the partner program, which I think is also in full effect in probably the way that it was meant to be. So Nvidia's the boss. They make all the rules. If they tell you you have to sell your base model card at like, it has to hit shelves at you have to ensure that your card in each region is hitting the recommended retail price or the manufacturer's suggested retail price. It has to hit that. Then it has to hit that. And you won't see Asus or MSI jacking up prices in their own store. So if they're jacking up prices in their own store, it's because Nvidia has allowed them to do so. So I just want to
Yeah.
make that really, really clear to people who are listening. Nvidia controls everything, and ruthlessly so. So if you step out of line, you're done. And I wonder if what you were talking about because we've heard historically Nvidia not super great to their partners. It's like Nvidia makes all the money and you should just be thankful that you can work with us. That's certainly what we've heard over the years from
Hmm.
partners, is that they should be thankful that they get anything out of this deal. Nvidia's lifting them up and bringing them along for the ride. And I think that was the case for a long time. Brands like EVGA, who are massive Nvidia partners, were like, no, we hate the way we're being treated. We don't like the margins. It's not a sustainable business model for us. We're out. And I think that was probably a huge shock to a lot of people at Nvidia, that it wasn't just a bluff, or they weren't just whining. They're like, no, we're actually done. Like, this is unsustainable. It's not a way to run a business, so we're done. And I wonder how much they're worried about that happening with other partners, like maybe ASUS, for example. So I don't know. That's again pure speculation, but it's quite interesting that EVGA falls off, and then not too soon after, or not too long after, rather, we see these MSRP prices set, and then the actual what you can buy them for directly from the partners is hugely inflated. So could it be a situation, again, heavily speculation here, could it be a situation where NVIDIA's, they've all got together and they're like, all right, guys, everyone's going to be getting the same percentage or allocation that you normally get, but we're going to be dialing it back. It's going to drive up demand. You guys can basically scalp your customers directly and everyone makes good money. I don't know. That's what's happening so far. How that's happening, like, you know what I mean? We know that's happening so far, but what conversations and what strategies and plans are at play to have seen that happen, we can only speculate.
I mean, there's a couple of things that I would think of immediately. The first one is if Nvidia was really interested in getting these cards to gamers at the price that they've advertised, they would make a lot more Founders Edition cards. They can sell directly a 5080 for $1,000 and a 5090 for $2,000 because there's a Founders Edition model. That wouldn't work for, say, a 5070 Ti where there's no Founders Edition card, but with these models, they could just sell more directly. So with all business decisions, there's always some reason why you wouldn't, they're not doing that. So potentially one of the angles, of course, is there's some reason why they want to keep partners happy. Maybe they make money out of them in some other way. Obviously brands like Asus, Gigabyte, they use these GPUs for laptops and those sorts of things. So it's very complex, the relationship between NVIDIA and partners. But historically, we've heard, NVIDIA doesn't want to upset partners too much, so they don't produce tons of Founders Edition cards. They still want the partners to be doing the bulk of the GPU production and that sort of thing, as opposed to just flooding the market with MSRP cards. Because as I've said, there's really nothing stopping them from just making as many Founders Edition cards as possible and really limiting the supply of all these expensive, 20%, 30% above MSRP cards.
Mm-hmm.
So one angle, of course, is what you've been saying. Yes, they could be trying to give partners a bit of a handout, basically saying, well, we're not going to make too many Founders Edition cards. You don't need to make MSRP cards, and go your hardest. Try sell these for $1,200, $1,300 US, 5090s for $2,500 US or whatever. The other possible reason, which is perhaps a bit more nefarious, and again, I'm not suggesting this is what's happening, I'm just providing a potential reason, is, well, if they limit the supply right so that 5090s are now not $2,000, they're $2,500 to buy one or $3,000 or whatever, and they've sold some allocation to partners at, let's say, $2,000. Let's say they've sold all of the 5090 GPU dies to partners at a price that would allow them to hit $2,000 US. So there's no inflation of the GPU dies and memory package pricing. And to be clear, NVIDIA usually sells the GPU die and memory as a package, as the core component that goes into those cards. So let's say AIBs could be hitting $2,000. And it's up to now, it's all on the AIBs, pricing them at $2,500 or $3,000 or whatever. Well, if NVIDIA goes, well, we're not going to supply you too many of these. Like, you can hit $2,000, but we're just not going to give you very many. And then later, a couple of months later, they're saying, oh, so MSI and Asus and Gigabyte, you've raised the price of your base model card from $2,000 to $2,200 or $2,500 because everyone's buying them. They're selling out instantly, blah, 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 right? Like there's no supply of them. You know how we were selling you those so that you could hit them for $2,000? Well, that's not happening anymore. We're now going to make it so that we want a bit of that money. We want a cut of that because you're obviously inflating the price. So the price that we're selling you the GPU package now, that won't allow you to hit $2,000. You're going to have to sell it for $2,200 or $2,500 or whatever. I'm not saying that's happening, but you can see how something like that has the potential to happen when you so heavily restrict supply. And I think there was a bit of discontent from some of the GPU manufacturers back in the cryptocurrency era where distributors and AIBs were making these huge bulk money on cards because they were so in demand and selling out instantly. And poor old Nvidia is sitting over there selling you cards at what's supposed to be the MSRP. Well, if you can do a bit of back channel work to make it so that demand is higher than supply, and then you start pulling in these sorts of moves, you can engineer theoretically a higher price for these models. So again, what we're seeing from the market with these AIBs selling cards for more money, someone has got to be benefiting from this at somewhere along the line, because it's always beneficial for companies. Companies don't make decisions that make them lose money. They will always do everything they can to make more and more money.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not it's AIBs being thrown a bone and being like, yeah, just sell them for whatever, or whether there's some engineering work going on to try and make the price as high as possible so that everyone can cash in, and whether or not Nvidia is making some of that as well as AIBs and distributors, I'm not sure. But to me, at least, the moves that are being made are not indicative of any real effort to make these cards available for the MSRP. They don't really seem to care that much.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know what you make of that, but those are just my thoughts, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I don't know if we've actually said it in the podcast yet, but we're basing a lot of this on the fact that both MSI and ASUS have officially raised prices at their own store. So at the moment, neither of them have stock, but you can sign up to be notified, and when they come into stock, you pay the list prices. And to give you an idea, like the Astral liquid cooled model, so of the 5090, so it's a $2,000 US MSRP. You typically expect it maybe to be even an absurd price would be like $2,400, would you say?
Yeah.
And they're selling it for $3,400. So it's about $1,200 over what we would already deem a very high premium, and that's the official ASUS price. So you can go over to the ASUS store, you can sign up, you can say, notify me when this is in stock, and you can purchase it for that price when they get stock. So basically, to buy directly from ASUS, the cheapest 5090 you can get, so this would be an official ASUS price, is $2,750 for the tough gaming model. So it's not $2,000. They want $2,750. So that would be their official price. And they're scalping, let's say, harder than anyone else. But we're seeing it from MSI as well. They've jacked up all the prices well over MSRP. And, like if you go over to the MSI store, for example, their Ventus 5080 is $1,140. So it's $140 over MSRP, which is certainly a lot more reasonable. But if you look at like the Vanguard, for example, that's $1,400. Now, if you click notify me on all of these, which ones do you think are more likely to come into stock?
Yeah, they're doing whatever they can to not sell you the Ventus for $1,140.
Yep.
I mean, there was a few other suspicious things that I noticed earlier in the launch as well. Like, I think it was ASUS that announced cards with like an introductory price. Mm-hmm. So it was like the Asus Prime 5080, I think. And I don't know whether I'm just going off my memory here, but I believe that card was announced with an introductory price of $1,000. But the actual long-term MSRP on that card was more like $1,100 or $1,200. I'm not sure whether they've raised that again, but it's just a really weird thing to do. Like, why is your base model card only going to be available for an introductory price of $1,000? It should be $1,000 forever. Like, you're basically indicating at launch that you're going to jack up the price soon. So
it's essentially like the review price, but even that's pointless because I don't think there were too many 5080, 5090 reviews that were raving about the price or the value they were offering. So it's just gone from being like not great value, don't really recommend, to absurd, but people are still buying them anyway. So this isn't, not the fault of the reviewers, and clearly we don't influence these people's buying decisions anyway. Because if someone came to me and said, should I spend $3,400 on an RTX 5090, I'd be like, you, sir, are insane. And probably use a good sum of that money to find a therapist. There is work to be done here. Like, unless you're a multi-millionaire and money just doesn't mean anything to you anymore, unless you're in that situation, which I don't think all of these people snapping up 5090s are necessarily in that situation. Money probably does have some sort of like meaning or value to them. Then, I don't know, I guess, easiest way to say this, Tim, is I don't know how to comprehend someone spending $3,400 on a 5090.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked in the past about how I think we both agreed that 5090s would likely sell for $3,000 US pretty easily,
Mm-hmm.
at least for some period of time. And we've seen comments on videos when we've been talking about prices saying, well, why would Nvidia make no supply? Like, isn't the best move to sell as many $2,000 GPUs as you can, as opposed to selling a far lower number of GPUs by limiting supply at a higher price? So I think that's been the question that a lot of people have had is, that on face value doesn't seem to make sense. But what I'm suggesting, the move that's being made, and again, I don't know whether it's AIBs or Nvidia trying to benefit from this, but my theory is that they're trying not to sell any cards for $2,000. So they're going to make a certain number of models, and that number that they're able to make is always the number. It's however many hundreds of thousands of units or whatever. Instead of selling you all of those cards as quickly as possible for $2,000, they're trying to sell every single model for a minimum of $2,500 plus, or at least based on what we're seeing from some of these AIB prices, probably more like $3,000. So they're trying to do whatever they can to make that happen. And so my thinking is the strategy they're employing is restrict supply early so that no one can buy them from $2,000, make it so that people will start paying $2,500 plus for GPUs, and then sustain that for as long as you possibly can. So if the price is accepted in the market that, so they announced it at $2,000, but there's no supply, therefore they're $2,500, then over the course of the next year, you can push out the amount that you've made and make $2,500 on every single model instead of $2,000. And basically the same thing happening with the 5080. They want to sell that for minimum $1,200. So you drip out supply, increase the price to $1,200 because there's no supply, demand's exceeding it. And then hopefully over time, people won't notice that they're actually just selling every model for $1,200. And instantly what you've done is made the reviews slightly more palatable. So the reviews are basically at a price where instead of it being like overwhelmingly negative, they're just sneaking into potentially okay levels of value and then going, no, we're just going to try sell them for as high as possible after that point.
Yeah, that would be my analysis of this. Because they had to unlaunch previously, then they did the $1,200 4080, which wasn't that well received, negative connotation around that one, and therefore didn't sell that well. They probably released too many of them as well, which is why they sat on shelves. So yeah, they've just taken the learnings from that and gone, okay, so we still want to hit that $1,200 price for that particular product. We just have to go about it in a way that, A, we make the product look better and then harder to acquire, which somehow makes it more desirable to consumers.
Well, it does. It's a FOMO thing, and it's as well about, you see that with a lot of luxury products, especially like sneakers, for example, where they're like a limited edition thing. It's like they could make as many of a limited edition sneaker as they want, but the idea is to limit the supply so you can sell them for as high as you possibly can. And then when you do the numbers, it works out so that they actually end up making more money from that strategy. And it also reinforces this idea that it's a premium desirable product, and therefore for future generations, so either that's a future sneaker design, so you start incepting into people's minds that these are hard to buy. Like, you will have to spend more of a premium on them. They are premium products in demand. You have to spend a lot of money on these. And if you keep doing that generation after generation, you can reinforce this mindset so that there's more FOMO at launches. There's more of this thinking of, well, I'm just going to have to spend this price. And there's less analysis and less less sort of, oh, I'm just going to wait for it to become the cheaper price. They're like, no, 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 no. This will never be available at that price. You will learn, you will submit to our pricing. And if you want that premium product, buy it at that price. And I mean, this only works if there's no competition. So
Mhm.
obviously the 5090 is almost certainly going to be a product without competition. If there was suddenly a competitor flooding the market with similar performing cards that were widely available at a much more attractive price, this whole strategy completely falls apart. It just does not work. It also doesn't work if people don't buy the cards, because then they end up with too many and they have to, over time, start lowering the price. But I think what they're trying to do is, instead of trying to sell most of the cards within the first couple of months of launch, they're just eating that and going, well, hopefully in 6 months' time from now, we'll still have sold the amount that we want to sell, but because we're back ending all of the supply, we'll try and get more money for it.
Yeah, they don't just service the entire market in the first 2 weeks of release.
Yeah,
It's a long game now. They've got 2 years at least between releases,
yeah,
so they want to be making fat margins for that entire period.
mhm,
Yeah. So, but coming back to something you said earlier, which really that basically explains it all. So you said when we discussed this prior to launch and what we thought the performance uplift would be, we basically said an RTX 5090 would sell no worries at $3,000.
yeah,
I think that's basically what we said. And if we've come to that conclusion and we've said that, Nvidia is well aware that that's the price they can charge.
yeah.
So that was those sort of prices are the prices they want to charge, and they're going about it in a way that lessens the blow
Mhm.
but allows them to achieve it.
And they get more flexibility with this strategy as well, because
Mhm.
Nvidia is famously not a company that lowers the price, not like AMD. So
Mhm.
AMD, as we've seen famously through the RDNA 3 era, they set a price, then within a couple of months, that price is basically just it is not the price anymore. They've lowered it to some lower level. It's never an official price cut, but you can just buy them for a lower price. Nvidia doesn't really do that. They occasionally adjust prices when they create a new model. So 4070 Super, $600 replaces the 4070, then the 4070 goes to $550. But generally speaking, if cards aren't selling, they don't lower the price. So the 4080, for example, sat on shelves. They never really lowered the price on that model. There was maybe $50 to $100 of adjustments, but not anything significant. Whereas this strategy, where you set an MSRP, but then you just try and sell cards for as high as you possibly can, it allows them much more flexibility to adjust pricing to market demand. So
Mhm.
if for the next 3 months they can sell cards for $1,300, $1,400 for a 5080, great, they win. They get much higher margins, much better sales. And then over the months after that, they can start slowly lowering the price if demand starts to dry up. So if what
Mhm.
we're saying is happening where they're not able to sell the cards at the highest price they can indefinitely, which I think will happen for 5090, it's quite likely that demand will be high for that card for a while. But for 5080, you're saturated at $1,400. Then you leave it for a couple of weeks, you start to see, okay, there's not as much interest in cards at that price. So now we'll release the $1,300 models, then the
Mhm.
$1,200 models, then the $1,100 models, and then eventually you'll be selling the card at the MSRP, but you've never changed the price. All you've done is just manipulated the market a bit so that you can get as much money as you can for the cards, up to the point where you're just selling it for the price it was advertised. Whereas if they were flooding the market at $1,000 and then demand dried up for that, then they have to start lowering the price below the MSRP. They have to start changing the price. They have to re-release a super card that fixes the price
Mhm.
and all that sort of thing. So the strategy of what they're doing, where they can sort of manipulate reviews a bit, make them a bit more positive for cost per frame graphs, sell it high, and then over time they have that flexibility to lower it back to the MSRP, allows them to make as much money as they possibly can, in my opinion at least. And I'm
Yep.
assuming that they're going to make the exact same number of cards either way, whether they were flooding the market to begin with or drip feeding them. There's always a number in mind that they were going to make. And we're just not in the era anymore where there's the incentive to push out all the cards on launch, especially for models where there's little to no competition.
Yep. No, it doesn't make sense to do that. It's a win-win strategy for them, really, because if in 6 months they've basically tapped everyone that's going to spend stupid premiums and they've worked down back towards the MSRP. The defense there, you'll see it from Nvidia fans, is Nvidia was never scalping you. They were never doing any of the things that people said they were doing. It's just that demand was so high and they couldn't meet that demand, and now demand's cooled off. And so the same things happen. You can just put a different spin on how we got there. So yeah, and again, it comes back to what I was saying earlier. The high prices now, people will argue, aren't Nvidia's fault. Like, Nvidia can't control their partners, they can't control distributors, retailers. So Nvidia has been selling them at the MSRP, or to enable the MSRP from day one. They have not made an extra dollar. It's the partners and everyone else who's made the extra dollars. Whether or not that's true, not sure. I mean, you don't have evidence either way. All, again, I can tell you is that you don't really need evidence to make those cases. You just need to understand the facts. And the fact is, if Nvidia wanted these cards to be selling at the MSRP, they would definitely, without question, be selling at the MSRP.
Yeah.
End of story. So you need to understand that and then accept that, because that's the reality of the situation. And then once you understand and accept that, then you can work out what you think is going on here.
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to know exactly who's benefiting from the higher prices, but I think the easiest evidence that you can make for this is companies will always do what they're going to do to make as much money as they possibly can. And so these decisions are not being made to be generous to consumers or to benefit consumers. They're being made to make money. And whether they're being allowed to, or whether there's some sort of return on, Nvidia are allowing them to, I'm not sure. We're probably never going to know the answer to that. But it ends up just hurting consumers either way, because you're not able to buy the cards at the price that they're supposed to be listed for.
Well, what we know is either the partners are making way more money than they should be, or Nvidia is making way more money than they should be, or what looks to be more likely is they're both making way more money than what they well, when I say what they should be, I mean at what they claim they should have been based on the MSRP. So
yeah, that's right. And we'll see how the supply situation goes for the next couple of months and that sort of thing, because I think while the 5090 is quite likely to remain at a high price for a while, the 5080, I wouldn't say the reception from gamers has been overly positive towards that card, just in general. I don't know whether that's people generally buying lower price cards, complaining about the price of a higher price card and just not buying it, not sure. But we'll figure that out within a couple of months. I think whether this strategy will work for the 5080 is the most interesting question to me.
And what are we going to see with the 5070, 5070 Ti?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure on that one. I think like I said, the strategy for the higher tier cards, it's more likely to succeed because of a lack of competition. I would expect that AMD will be able to have cards that are in that range of competitiveness, at least for the performance side of things. I've got no idea about how well they're going to price it, features, or we've discussed that at length. We don't need to go into all that stuff again. But AMD should have some sort of product in that range, which will, I think, make it harder to pull off that sort of strategy. So whether or not Nvidia and their partners are doing this at the high end because they know they won't be able to do it for the lower tier cards, so they're trying to cash in on that while they can, I'm not sure. But I think if there was a 9070 XT that was highly competitive with the 5070, they couldn't just make their 5070 $700. Like, that just wouldn't work. It would instantly become much worse compared to AMD's models. And again, I think in your reviews and that sort of thing, you would be looking at the price. Let's say the 5070 comes out a couple of weeks ahead of the 9070 XT, which seems to be the case, was likely to be the case. You would be looking at what are they actually selling a 5070 for, and then comparing that to whatever value AMD is offering. And if that card goes from $550 US to $700 US, that's obviously going to make the real current pricing of the Nvidia models look a lot worse, and the AMD card look more favorable. So they're going to have an incentive not to do that if there's competition. To what degree, I'm not sure, but at least that's how I would see it.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully AMD doesn't screw that one up. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see long term how these things play out. But I think one of the strongest points that we have pointing to this, in addition to the things that we've been talking about, is just the number of cards that are available. I think it's very clear that while demand is outstripping supply, that the supply was never a realistic number. Like there are times with products where they could underestimate the amount of demand and they just accidentally don't make enough cards, in which case then they've kind of screwed up a bit there. They want to make more, but they haven't. But I think the numbers that we're hearing out of retailers for 5090s in particular was never a realistic number.
Yeah, it was
Like
nothing.
sending
Yeah.
5 cards to a retailer was obviously never going to be enough. There was obviously more than 5 people would want that card at most physical locations or
Yeah, we're talking
retailers.
major retailer as well. Like we're
Yes.
talking about retailers that can sell, like we've heard them that on day one they've sold thousands of like Ryzen 5 CPUs, for example.
Yeah.
So this isn't some tiny little retailer or whatever. We're talking about the big boys that ship serious volume.
Yeah, we're talking Micro Center in the US, those sort of places where there's
Mhm,
some pretty compelling evidence that from people lining up trying to buy cards that if you were like eighth in line, you just didn't get a 5090.
mhm. Yeah, it's absurd. That's not even a launch.
So I think when we're talking about like what are the facts that we can look at when examining this, that can be added to the picture as well. That if they were trying to sell cards at the MSRP, if they were trying to even sell them for above the MSRP, they would have given more than the amount that they did to these retailers so that they could benefit now from the high prices. So I think there's more going on when it comes to that. And I think we talked about in the Q&A as well, one angle is selling a 5090 as a workstation card for like $8,000 instead of a 5090 for $2,000. That's another potential play there. But again, it all comes down to it benefits them to do this, and that's why they're doing it. They're not doing it because they're not losing money on this strategy because Nvidia doesn't make those sorts of strategies.
Mhm.
So unless the launch is way more successful than they were anticipating, but there's no indication that I can see that that's the case.
Yep. And they are preparing next generation, workstation GPUs. So that's
Yeah.
certainly a possible angle there. And yeah, they're going to cost a lot more than the desktop version.
And the laptop cards as well. I believe the 5080 die will be used for laptops as sort of the
Hmm.
flagship laptop model.
Hmm.
And the margins on laptops are significantly higher than
Hmm.
graphics card AIB, add-in card models.
Hmm.
So again, they can restrict supply and put them into those cards as well. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about our boring life. All right, and we're back. I've been told that Steve has an interesting story to tell regarding Balin. So what's the situation?
Well, first of all, Tim, I don't appreciate you telling people that it's interesting because I can't guarantee that. And this is the boring life segment. So
True,
I think
true.
it,
Maybe
I
I've
think it,
hyped it too
yeah, I
much.
think it would be inappropriate for the story to be interesting. Uh,
True.
but anyway, I'll tell this story. I have a few things I've been doing personally. One of them is sort of a car related story as well, but it might be one that you're interested in because it's like paint correction and stuff. I've been fixing like stone chips and all that sort of stuff,
Oh,
so
yeah.
learning about that. So that's kind of fun. And then of course I've been building the Harbor Box gym, and that's been very slowly progressing because I think we talked about the hot weather and busy work schedule and stuff. So I don't have too much stuff there to talk about. But before Christmas, a couple of weeks before Christmas, I believe, video editor Balin, and the reason I'm telling this story is because a few people have asked for this story to be explained because I mentioned it on X because Balin was getting messed around by his insurance company. Anyway, a few weeks before Christmas, Balin has gone into the city for various reasons, but they
This is
decided to,
the city of Melbourne, just for context.
he's driven into a city, so there's like tallish buildings and lots of people, so it's like a city. Um, and he's gone in there and parked in, one of the secure multi-story car parks that you pay to park at.
Yeah.
So he's got a Volkswagen Arteon. It's not a super well-known car, but it's a super nice sedan. And he's a young guy, pride and joy, loves his car. It's in absolutely immaculate condition, low kilometer car. not a mark on it, right? Loves the thing, looks after it well. So he's driven, him and his girlfriend have gone into the city of Melbourne, and parked in a secure car park, or so they thought. They then went and did some Christmas shopping, came back to the car, and all of the side windows are just smashed and there's glass everywhere. So the Arteon has those frameless windows, side
Yeah.
windows. So basically the whole side of the car was open, and I think it was 3 glass panels were shattered. So the very back one and then the 2 door panels. They managed to dint the roof as well, which was just great. And one of the doors was damaged quite badly to the point where it has to be replaced. And this person did this just to take Balin's backpack, which unfortunately he left on the back seat and didn't chuck in the boot. But in Balin's defense, he was parking in a paid, what was meant to be a secure car park that people just can't walk into. Which, I mean, I guess you could. Anyway, so that happened. So that sucked. So Balin contacted the police, who I suppose didn't do too much at the time. And then he had to drive from Melbourne home, which is probably an hour and a half, with glass throughout the car and no side windows. So you can imagine that would have been a fun time. Anyway, that was just before Christmas, so he couldn't get it checked. He couldn't, no one was going to repair it, the car. So he had no car for Christmas. Thankfully, I've got a third car, which also happens to be a Volkswagen, but it's just a Passat, so not an Arteon. Anyway, I lent that to Balin, so he at least had a car to get around and do all these Christmas stuff over the holiday period while he wasn't at work. And then when he came back to work, I think a week after, in the new year, he was able to get it into, like a panel shop to get the panels fixed and the glass and all that sort of stuff done under insurance. So that, the insurance claim was successfully filed, and that was all fine. Since then, so he still doesn't have the car, and no news on when the car will be ready. It was possibly going to be about 2 months.
Really?
So, yeah, because they have to order a whole new door from Volkswagen, so that has to come in. That's obviously got to be sprayed and color matched to the car. There has to be, I guess, some sort of panel beating and correction done to the roof, where they've smashed something against the window and it's hit the roof panel. No structural damage, but certainly panel damage. So don't look great. So that's got to be fixed, and then all the glass has to be fixed and stuff like that. So I don't know if there's any damage to the interior, but a bit of work. And they're, you don't want to get any jobs done if they've got to be done in a hurry in January, because people have a massive
on holiday.
Yeah, so I imagine there's a backlog and stuff like that. So we had to hire a car, and he did that through RACV, which is what I put out on X, and that was a really annoying process to get the car, because this is done under insurance. But they're making him every 2 weeks. He has to renew the car because they can only give it to him for a 2-week period, but it can't like auto renew under his insurance. So he has to contact RACV to then get them to do it.
Right.
So,
yep.
And that's like an hour wait on the phone every 2 weeks. I mean, like, no, it's not the worst thing in the world, but Balin pays, I think he said it's about almost $3,000 a year for insurance. And he's been with RACV for a decade now. And he's never made a claim before in his life. So this is his first claim. He's essentially paid them $30,000, or probably close to $30,000, over $20,000 in insurance. And this is his first claim. And they're like, dick him around a fair bit. So that was a bit frustrating.
Well, it sounds like an insurance company, but
it sounds, it's not like shocking or like this is so unusual or I can't believe that, but it's just insult to injury, I guess.
Yeah, it's the state of the insurance market right now is that they're just jacking up premiums and not giving you good service.
Well, yeah, I don't want to fixate too much on that one thing. It's more that these are all the inconveniences that have happened in Balin's life because he decided to go and park his car in a secure, paid-for parking facility. So I'm just building up the story from that horrible mistake Balin made, and these are all the consequences of it. And then on top of that, the police finally follow up with him, and they're like, "Oh, we pretty confident we know who smashed your car. Like we've gone through So, because there's no cameras in the car park. It's only like entering and leaving the premises that they can record people coming and going. So they locked down the time at which they were there, and a known suspect has gone in there. So they're like extremely confident that it was this guy. And Balin's like, okay, so what do you do about it? And I believe the conclusion is essentially they're not doing anything about it because this person's known to police. They're a repeat offender. So it's like, we know this person to be a bad guy. So basically, if you would like to, you can press charges and take him to court. So you can like spend a ton of money and risk spending a ton more money. And this person, drug addict or whatever, I'm sure Balin's going to get paid out really well from this person for damaging his car. So that's kind of the story. So basically, Balin parked his car. Someone who's a loser decided to walk in there, canvass the joint, find a car with something that looks like they could easily steal, then excessively smash up the car to get the bag, and then just walk out. Police are confident they know exactly who they did it, but they're going to do zero legwork because it's just a ton of, that's essentially what it is, paperwork, legwork. They go get the person, Balin maybe gets his backpack and, possibly $1,000 worth of items that were in it back if they've not already been sold, which they almost certainly have been. So Balin gets nothing back. The police have to do a ton of paperwork and legwork, and then the person just gets released and they go do it again. So that's where we are with our legal system and the laws. And I told the story about Matt's house, the home invasion that happened to Matt, who started Harbour Unboxed. That was early last year, wasn't it? Or earlier, I forget now. It was a while ago, but same sort of thing. A much worse thing happened to Matt. And again, for those of you who don't know, if you go back and look at the earlier videos on the Harbour Unboxed channel, that was Matt. So he sort of started the channel, but moved on to other things, and I took over. And yeah, he was at home with his young family, asleep, and some people, teenage kids, broke into his house, stole his keys, took his AMG, took his Volkswagen, took all of their laptop computers, their wallets, the whole lot. And the police sort of know the gang of kids going around doing it. They occasionally arrest them. They're out the next day doing it again because our system sucks. But yeah, so basically Balin, young guy, done nothing wrong. It's cost him tons of time and money, and it's just crazy that if you're a big enough loser, you can just go around doing whatever you want now. That's where we're at. So,
well, there's a whole bunch of issues there, isn't there? Usually courts are clogged up. Like, even if Balin wanted to take this guy to court, he probably wouldn't get into court for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, it's just, not an ideal situation and solution there. I would have liked to see, if you're paying those significant premiums, it should be possible for the insurance company to take the criminal to court to get the money back to pay for whatever. But
I guess they're in the same position though. They're like the amount of money, time, and if this is for a lack of a better term, like, a crackhead, a drug addict who has no money and nothing going for them. It's like, and that's the problem. Like you, Tim, someone who works hard and is making a life for themselves and has money and assets, they're like, oh, we'll go after you, we'll wreck you because there's a payday in that. But if you were just some absolute loser who didn't have a job, didn't have any money, and you went around assaulting people and taking stuff, they'd be like, well, out on the street with you, we can't make any money off you. That sort of seems to be how the system is at this point in time. But it's just wild to me that you can go smash up someone's car and the police sort of know who you are and that you did it, and they're like, like, that don't really want to chase that one up. so weird. But yeah, that's the state of things in Australia. I know it's a similar situation in some other countries, but they
I think
definitely
it's most other countries. We heard a lot of people from on that when we talked about the Matt story on the podcast, basically saying, yeah, that sounds about right for wherever location I live. So
yeah. Well, it's getting really bad here, and the public's becoming more and more aware of it. So I think they're going to have to change things. Like car thefts are through the roof. So that's pretty crazy.
people like I know that it happens a lot in America, and I think it's happening here now too. Like people stealing catalytic converters and stuff off cars, and
I was shocked when I first heard about that in the US, and I think maybe Canada as well. I'm not sure, but over there. But here in Australia, this is happening in the UK as well. But in Australia, it's more specific to the Holden Commodores. The V6 and V8 models are just being stolen in record numbers for either joyriding or chop shops and stuff like that, because the V8 engine is worth, and all the parts in those cars, because they don't make them anymore, is worth so much money. So they've got, I was watching a guy on YouTube, and they've got satellite imagery of people just in the suburbs with multiple stripped down Commodores in their backyard. But the police aren't really doing anything about it. I guess don't want to bash the police too much, because it's probably more just the law. The police can only work within the law, so there's no point going and arresting these people and doing all that sort of stuff if essentially they can't or won't be prosecuted. Like there's no actual real consequences for it, which I don't even know how that's a thing, right? You've committed a crime. I don't understand. But yeah, car theft and all that stuff is just out of control.
The one thing that I was really surprised about was that I know a couple of people from my uni days that were doing like work on the train system. So Melbourne's like electric trains, doing consulting and that sort of thing. And they were saying that like the theft of the copper wires that attach to that are the overhead copper wires that the trains run on, people steal that. Like they actually go and cut off the live electric wires. They will go and cut off to recover the copper to then go and sell it, because the copper is valuable and it's just there. So these people have to spend a lot of time like going around fixing train line wires that are getting cut up and sold, which is just like, it's wild when you think about all these like criminal enterprises that are going on, and like the sort of stuff that it kind of slips through the cracks, right? Like people stealing and selling catalytic converters and copper train wires. It's like obviously the courts are busy doing more serious cases, so they're doing all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's not enough capacity in the system to deal with these like more petty crimes, I guess.
Yeah, more serious or more profitable.
But well, like either way, like either it's someone suing someone for money and they're rich people fighting rich people, or it's, they're dealing with all the murderers and all that stuff. So
yeah. Like if I said to you, how bad does it sound if you've got a young family, like a toddler and a baby in a crib, and you're in a nice area, you've got your house and all that, and you've locked all the doors, but you've left like a one window open or whatever. But the situation is your house gets broken into at night by multiple teenagers that steal all your stuff. They've got bats and that. So if you do wake up, they're willing to assault you to get away with the crime. And that would just sound like an extreme scenario to you, right?
Yeah.
Like you'd be like, well, that's a rare thing. That doesn't really happen in Australia all that often. I've not, that's an extreme rare case. And so when Matt was talking with the police, they were shocked that Matt's story made it to mainstream news. So Matt knows some people who host radio stations and stuff like that. So Matt got in contact with them and told them the story, and they're like, "Oh, this is crazy." So they told Matt's story, and Matt got interviewed. I think it was at least on the radio. I think one of the news stations picked it up as well and did an interview with Matt, but they actually didn't call him Matt. They called him another name, which I can't remember. It was very funny. It was like Brad or something. It was very funny. They said it like 6 times as well, but Matt didn't bother correcting him because he's like, that's not the point of getting this message out. But so that happened. And the police's response to Matt when they came back to speak with Matt, they're like, yeah, we're pretty blown away that this has gone to the mainstream media, like the news is talking about on the radio. Because he's like, this crap happens like in Victoria dozens of times every single night and has been for many years. He's like, this isn't like a new thing. This isn't like a... And I was like, holy crap, that's pretty wild to me that the police were actually shocked that the news was bothering to cover it, because it's just been an ongoing issue that's so prevalent for so long. So anyway,
I want to talk about another company screwing people over. So not the cop, not that the cops are a company, but insurance companies, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
I'm going
well,
to talk
again,
about
again, I don't even think the cops are screwing people over. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not necessarily dunking on them. They're just working
the
within the rules
system.
and the power. Yeah.
We'll say the system is screwing people like Balin
Mm,
over with this, which is unfortunate. Feel for
yeah.
Balin. So give him some love and support in the comments. I want to talk about my robot vacuum cleaner, which is quite a change.
It hasn't been arresting people, has it, Tim?
Well, I mean, if someone wants to come out my way, it'd be interesting. But no, I'll talk about my robot vacuum cleaner. So I have an iRobot robot vacuum cleaner, and I recommend most people to get a robot vacuum cleaner. Saves a lot of time for vacuuming. And I'm not necessarily recommending an iRobot one or whatever. I got this one because we have dark carpets. Based on the research I did, a lot of systems do not work well with dark carpets. The iRobot ones, user reviews were great for dark carpets. So I'm like, I'll get this robot vacuum cleaner, whatever, all good. It's been working fine for a few years now, but the battery was getting a little bit low in its capacity. It's been used a bit over the last couple of years, so it was time to get a replacement. So normally this would be a complete nothing story. Just buy a replacement battery, easy. I look on the iRobot store for my particular vacuum model, and there's the normal battery model that fits into my vacuum cleaner, the exact replacement for the one that's in there. And then I see this one that's got double the capacity. And so I'm like, how does that fit inside my robot vacuum and it provide double the capacity? Isn't the hole for the battery only one size? It can only fit one specific type of vacuum battery. It turns out that when you buy this model, and it wasn't a cheap model, it would have cost me over $1,000 Australian to buy whatever. I can't remember what model it is. It turns out that even though you're buying a high-end vacuum model with the little station that sucks all the stuff out of the vacuum cleaner, it's all automated system, that they deliberately put in a half capacity battery into this vacuum cleaner. And they only give you the full capacity battery if you buy the even more premium model that has mopping functions or something. Some BS, right? And I was kind of shocked about that because I felt that the amount of money that I paid, they should have been giving me a full capacity battery, because the vacuum cleaner can only vacuum, even when the battery was new, for maybe an hour and a half on one charge before it has to recharge. And
Mhm.
if I want to do like my whole house, definitely not enough charge in one charge to go do a significant area of my house. So it has to go back, charge, then come back out. And over time, the battery degraded. Now it was only doing 40 to 50 minutes, which was enough to get an upgrade. I chucked in this battery that they should have provided with the unit when I bought it, that uses the whole capacity, the whole space in this unit. I'm getting like over 3 hours of vacuuming time on this vacuum cleaner now. And so anyway, I just think that it's a bit ridiculous, the amount that I paid for this system, and they couldn't even be bothered to give me the full capacity battery, which I think it was only, if you buy the replacement part, was maybe like $80 more to get the double capacity model, which
Mhm.
was less than double the price. So anyway, that annoyed me greatly when I discovered that they had shortchanged me battery capacity in the original model.
Well, yeah, I get it. They sort of had, they sort of hadn't. Like, if it's advertised to come with that capacity battery, then it's sort of like fair enough. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
if there was a competing brand that offered the same sort of unit with double the capacity, then you should have just gone with that one. So you did get what you were advertised. So, but I get what you're saying. You went out of your way to buy the most premium model they had. But it's kind of like when you buy a, you know, when us YouTubers buy a 911 Porsche, Tim, you know, when you bought one of those the other day. So
Yes,
you
my
go into
third,
the,
actually.
yeah, you go into the dealer and you're like, I want a Turbo S. Well, that'll be $550,000. So, okay, that's great. I'm a YouTuber, not a problem. They're like, but would you like Bluetooth? I'm making stuff up here. I'm sure it comes with Bluetooth standard. You're like, well, yeah, I want Bluetooth. Well, that's $3,000. And you want the center console to be carbon. It's like, well, they're carbon in the photo. I don't want plastic. Like, well, that's $5,000. You know what I mean? Like, you buy
Yes.
you buy a premium car that you think you're getting the bee's knees, and they're like, well, this one actually has all the AMD trimmings. If you want the Nvidia trimmings, that's going to cost you. So yeah.
I
Anyway,
get that. I just feel like if I had known that there was like, well, I guess the thing is that there wasn't like the model I bought, then the model I bought high capacity version where I could have paid a small amount more, got the unit that had double the battery. It was just the model with the battery. And then it turns, you have to do all this research to figure out that they actually make a slightly different battery model. So it's kind of like going to the Porsche dealer, they sell you the car, and then later you find out that there's like a third party or a first party alternate dash that you can install yourself later that's way more premium and that you can buy separately.
Yeah, that
but you
happens all
can't
the
actually
time.
buy it when you actually buy the car.
Yeah, no, that's common practice in the car industry. That sort of stuff happens constantly.
So that's BS.
It is, but I mean, again, you at least you put like I imagine it was marketed correctly, so you purchased.
It was, yes.
So I get what you're saying, and it's a bit annoying. I don't know the timeline here. Did they make the high capacity battery later? But clearly they designed your model with only half the battery pack allocated with cells or whatever's in there.
It has almost a hole that was half filled.
Yeah, so it's a product segmentation thing. So basically like, well, we want to make this second tier premium product, and then we want to make the premium one that has these extra features. And one of the extra features is the runtime's extended. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what's happening there. So I get it, but
it is what it is. I mean, I believe that it was advertised correct. I actually don't know whether they advertised the battery life on it. Mm-hmm. But basically the product is significantly better with a better battery. And I think for me, at least, it was, if you wanted the larger capacity battery, you had to buy the mopping model, which has other downsides, like the dirt storage unit basically also becomes like you have to store water in there for mopping capacity. So I think there was some this is all from memory. It was like it potentially reduced the storage capacity of the dirt area to provide the mopping. And I was like, I don't really need mopping. I just want maximum dirt capabilities. And so,
Yeah. How many years did it take before the battery was degraded to the point where it was annoying?
This would have been like almost 2.5 years.
Yeah, see, that would annoy me more than everything else you've described, because you got where you were, advertised. 2.5 years, not a very long time to have to spend money on a replacement thing. That's kind of annoying. Mm-hmm. But I would look at it as, my opinion would be it sucks that I only got 2.5 years of acceptable battery life out of this thing. But on the plus side, at least I can replace the battery, and now there's a better battery available. It makes the product even better. So now I'm even more happy with the product I was previously happy with, apart from the battery dying.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is if they had put in the proper battery capacity to begin with, it wouldn't have degraded to an unusable point within 2.5 years. It probably would have lasted more like 5 years before it got to the point where it was unusable in terms, because
but you would have had to pay more initially, essentially.
Yeah, but I would have been willing to do that if I knew it was a thing. If I knew that I could have gotten a better model for the price of the battery or whatever, I absolutely would have. Like that wasn't a concern at all. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that was just my annoyance.
So really what you're saying is ultimately you're just disappointed you couldn't have got a better product from the start by paying more money.
Yes, I'm saying they should have put the better option available in the model I bought, if not made the exact same model with a full battery capacity for a higher price, and I would have paid for it.
So what you're saying is you're now getting a better understanding of GeForce owners. You were going to buy the 4080, but then you realized there was a 5090. Sorry, you were going to buy the 5080, and then you realized there was a 5090, and you're like, well, that's better. Yeah, it costs a lot more. Slightly different figures we're probably working with there.
Yes, but robot vacuum, fun times right there. Good systems to have, though. If you don't have a robot vacuum cleaner and you get annoyed by vacuuming, get a robot vacuum cleaner. They're pretty good. So that's that. Mm-hmm. That's that, really.
Cool. Well, rough. I mean, actually, funny listening to It's a story. It's whatever. It's all relative to your situation. We should actually give a shout out to Kyle Bitwit for what he's
Right.
gone through. I think he probably lost his robot vacuum as well, Tim.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting to talk about me getting annoyed about a half capacity robot vacuum cleaner battery while his entire house burnt down. So
And many other. I mean,
yeah,
look,
I feel for him.
you can't. I was joking. Yeah, it's like, I hurt my back once and I was feeling so sorry for myself. And then, when I went in to get it checked out and stuff, there was like a quadriplegic there, and I was like, God damn, I suck. I'm the worst. So yeah, but it's all relative and perspective and whatnot. But yeah, now Kyle is an absolute legend. So yeah, Kyle from the Bitwit channel, genuinely like very, very nice guy. And yeah, it's horrible what's happened to him. Basically lost everything except for his studio and his Audi RS3. So I'm glad he's got his car because I know he likes his car. But yeah, losing his house and all that sucks. So he's gone through a pretty tough time, but I think he's getting a lot of support. And it kind of sucks because he's been good to us, genuinely very good guy, but there's not too much we can do from here, unfortunately. So that sucks. I'd love to help him rebuild and stuff, but yeah, not super practical. I was actually wondering, I'm like, can we do some sort of collab where we go over and help set up his stuff? But it's probably difficult. Anyway, I'll talk with him. But
I can fly to the US and do some stuff.
I told you I will never fly to the US for events and stuff. But that is, I would do it for Kyle. I would fly to the US. It's about the only thing I could imagine I would fly to the US for. So that could be cool. But yeah, I'm not sure how all that's going, but I haven't talked to him privately just yet because I imagine he's got a million things going on, and really all we can sort of say is hope you're doing well. And yeah, but he knows if he needs anything from us, we'll help him out in any way we can, because yeah, really good guy, and he was good to our channel when we were nobody. Like a lot of people, sort of when you're a small YouTuber and stuff, don't want to know you, especially when you're as big as Kyle was at the time. But yeah, he just couldn't give us enough time, and yeah, he was great with advice and help and all that sort of stuff. So genuinely really nice guy.
Yeah,
but anyway,
cool guy in person. You never really know how other YouTubers are going to be when you meet them in person. And most people are genuinely quite nice people, generally speaking. But yeah, Kyle, I think, goes above and beyond that sort of level. He's always been, really accommodating. Always try and catch up when we're Computex and those sorts of things, and we're both at events. So yeah, it's pretty devastating to hear the news of his house burning down, because obviously we'd heard all of the news of the fires happening in Los Angeles and stuff. And I was actually flying through there while the fires were happening at CES. And I just thought, obviously that's going to affect a lot of celebrities and stuff, but you never know how it's going to affect, people that you know. So it's just very surprising when you hear that news and you're like, oh my God, that happened? Like that really for someone that we know? Because that would be devastating.
Hopefully we can catch up with him at Computex. And just on that note, we usually do try and catch up with Kyle at Computex, and we caught up with him, I think 2 years ago now. We had I think it was lunch or dinner with him, and we brought Balin, the video editor, along. And Balin, actually I think we went out for lunch with them, and it carried on to dinner, didn't it? I don't know, it went quite late. I remember we walked around with them for ages. So there's a few guys there, but there was Paul from Paul's Hardware, Kyle Bitwit, and Luke from LTT, who's also, all three of those guys are amazing. And Balin, who I think might have even been 3 years ago now, I can't remember. It was Balin's first tour of Computex, and Balin was like, wow, he was a bit starstruck. And he goes, I can't believe these guys who are, all popular, successful YouTubers and guys in their field, and they didn't know Balin from a bar of soap. He's just the new Hardware Unbox guy, the video editor, and he's like, they just all chatted with me. They were all really friendly. It was like I was just one of the guys. They weren't sort of like, oh, who's this guy or whatever. Just walked in, introduced Balin, and we went from there. I think Luke, Paul, Kyle, they all chatted with him for quite a long time, and he loved it. So he was pretty blown away by that. Really impressed with those guys. So that was nice.
I think that's a good example of like what people can be as well. Like it's sort of, we were coming up through the ranks of like going, because it's kind of always a weird scenario where you go from just doing something where no one's going to know who you are to being in a
Mhm.
position where now at Computex and stuff, we are meeting other creators and smaller creators, larger creators, and just like the example that we were set by people like Kyle of being really, really friendly and welcoming to people. That's what I always try and do when people approach us at these sort of shows as well, is sort of like, yeah, well, that was really nice what they did for us. So we can try and do the same sort of thing when other people chat to us at places like Computex or CES or wherever. So yeah, try and sort of pass that on a little bit to other
Mhm.
people. But yeah, that's the sort of scenario, I guess, with them. Yeah, really cool guys, and really enjoy hanging out and chatting with them at these sorts of trade shows. And hopefully we can do so again in 2025. It's actually coming up reasonably soon because
It
Computex
is,
is a
isn't
bit
it?
earlier this year. And
Yeah, I think it's only like just over 3 months away now. 3 and a
yeah,
half months or
so
something like that. Yeah,
yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, it'll be really good to catch up with them and yeah, offer our support in person and that sort of thing for his situation and all that sort of thing. So yeah,
Mhm.
hopefully Kyle is doing well and he gets back on his feet and yeah, can sort of move past this situation and come out the other end stronger and better because yeah, these things can be very, very character building in that way and try and look at it from a positive perspective. So yeah.
Mhm.
I guess that pretty much does it for this week's podcast. Thanks to everyone that's listened to this one to the end. We're going to still take a pretty close look at GPU prices as things go on for the next couple of weeks. We probably won't talk about it every single week, but we want to be getting a pretty good idea of MSRPs, what's the actual price, what's going on. So we'll try dig into that sort of thing. And obviously, one thing we didn't even touch on in this discussion as well is things like tariffs being applied in the United States from China and potentially Taiwan as well, and other countries in that region. So yeah, we'll be looking into that a bit and seeing what comes of it. But just know that we're not going to be sitting around and just not we're not going to be accepting the situation. We're going to be reporting on it and talking about it accurately for future reviews and things like that. So plenty more on that to come. But yeah, thanks to everyone that's listened to this one to the end. As always, we've got the Hardware Unboxed podcast YouTube channel if you want to see our sexy faces. If not, which is perfectly understandable, I wouldn't want to watch the video version. There's the audio feed as well. And for our Patreon members, we have the ad-free podcast feed as well. That's an option that's available. I've also put up our most recent live stream into there for people. So if you missed our monthly live stream for Patreon members, that's available in the supporter feed as sort of just an audio listen for people that want that because we get that requested from time to time. So anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for listening and we'll see you in the next one.